Have you dealt with the emotional buildup leading to deployment? Have you wondered why your service member's homecoming isn't like what you see on TV or the movies? Maybe you're struggling and you think you're the only one. This episode is for you. Welcome to MilSpouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to encouraging military spouses. I'm your host, Jen McDonald, and I was a military spouse for 30 years until my husband retired. We lived all around the world, raised 4 kids, and dealt with all the challenges and adventures of military life, just like you. Over the years, I came to believe that we military spouses are only stronger together. So whether you're a new or more seasoned spouse, whatever life is throwing your way, let's talk about it. Hey friends, on this Best Of episode, I am talking to my friend and experienced military wife, Terri Laurent, who shares some great advice for military families going through the time of deployment and reintegration. She has been through multiple deployments with her husband, and this is part 2 of our talk. You can listen to part 1 back on episode 31, all about mentoring and finding friends as a military spouse. But on this episode, we talk about preparing your heart and your marriage for deployment and reintegration. Reintegration is that time period after the service member returns home from a long separation or deployment. Are you facing the uncertain and confusing time of deployment and reintegration? Then I hope this episode will encourage your heart. If you follow me on social media, then you know that my daughter is due with her first baby very, very soon. And I know some of you are expecting too. What an exciting time. So I was happy to get a request from a company called Pink Stork to try out their pregnancy and pre-labor teas because I knew just the person, not me. So Grace tried it out and is still drinking the teas as she comes up to the birth of her first baby. Pink Stork was born out of the personal health struggles and complications that the founder, and who happens to be a military spouse, Amy Suzanne, experienced during her pregnancies. As a military spouse, she battled isolation, defeat, and guilt as she was in the hospital for months and away from her family while her husband was deployed. Many of us know that life. So Amy created Pink Stork, the wellness brand for women that helps others facing similar challenges. Pink Stork offers clean, effective supplements supporting fertility, morning sickness, pregnancy, postpartum, nursing, and more. There are no GMOs, gluten, soy, or dairy, and Pink Stork's prenatal vitamins and supplements are designed with your well-being in mind. My daughter Grace said she likes the tea cold because it is hot, hot, hot here in Texas, and that it's great with honey or even mixed with lemonade. Pink Stork is proudly women-owned and women-run, and Pink Stork's expert female team ensures quality at every step. All products are third-party tested for your peace of mind. So if you're ready to embark on your own wellness journey, subscribe and save 20% on your Pink Stork favorites through the link in the show notes or on my Instagram. So one of the things I wanted to talk to Terri about was marriage and reintegration after deployment or being separated, because I get a lot of notes about this topic from listeners, a lot. And usually it's along the lines of, we're not used to being together, or my husband or wife has just come back and they're not the same person. And it's so deep and it's kind of bigger than I can wrap my arms around. And I do have an episode about that and a lot of resources, but I thought it would be good to hear from a quote seasoned spouse. That's what we are.
Yes.
And kind of your experiences with it and maybe some tips about marriage after long separations. So definitely wanted to talk to Terri about that today. So you guys have been through it as far as deployments and separations.
Yes, we have. Kind of interesting. Jim's first third of his career, he really didn't deploy. He went on a few schools or, short-term trips, but we were fortunate that he didn't deploy. But at about the 10-year point is when deployment started. And then they were hot and heavy. I mean, he would go for...
Was that after 9/11?
Yeah.
I feel like that's the case for so many of us. Like it was total, there's the pre 9/11 life and the post 9/11 life. Yeah.
And so he would go for 6 months and then be back for 6 months and then be in the bucket again to go.
Yeah.
And it was shocking to me. I wasn't prepared for that because we had spent a good 10 years not doing that. And yeah, so yeah, we learned a lot about what to expect and how to do it a little bit better. And um, yeah, it just managing the whole experience. The first time, I think I wasn't prepared for the buildup.
Yeah.
And after doing it a few times, what I learned was the buildup for me was kind of the worst
I
part.
hate that part.
Um, yeah,
I hate
because
it.
I was dreading and anticipating, and we were kind of getting at each other, but didn't understand why. And yeah, it was just miserable. I just hated it.
You almost are like, you know what, if you just leave it, we could start the countdown and we could get this part over with.
Yeah,
And then you feel
yeah.
terrible for feeling that way.
Totally. Yeah, you do. And then you feel guilt that you're like, well, just go.
So we
But
can get this started. Yeah.
yeah, you just want to get it started because the sooner you get it started, the sooner you be done. And but yeah, the buildup was really bad. So I think it's really important for young spouses to know that that's normal. That it's don't be put off by that, and maybe even be a little bit prepared for it, because what we're doing is we're kind of pulling away a little bit and guarding our hearts and preparing for the pain of it. Um, I think it's a really natural part of it all, but it's still painful. I hated it.
Yeah. And I think the
Um,
pre-deployment fight or argument is more
yeah,
common than people say. And I remember being shocked by it and feeling like a terrible wife. And
yeah,
then kind of comparing notes with other people and realizing that's so normal. And it
yeah,
can be over something just so stupid. And you're going, they're about to be, in a war zone on the other side of the world. Why in the world am I being so petty? And it's really not
yes,
about whatever that thing is.
no, exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing that was hard for me was trying to be strong for my children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm a very emotional person. So yeah, they would see my emotion. Even if I wasn't crying, I was visibly unhappy about what was coming, and trying to help them manage their emotions over daddy leaving, and um, feeling guilt that I wasn't doing it good enough, and that they were responding to my sadness, or
Yeah.
so
I think kids are more resilient, though. I don't know if I've told this story before. So Steve was deployed for a good half of Matthew's high school years, our oldest son.
yeah,
And so for his senior year, we were in Germany and he deployed for a year. And I still have people say, why did you stay? I was like, well, what would I have done? Uprooted
right,
all four of my kids, moved, and then we would have to move again after the deployment. Like, why would I do that? I mean, if
right,
that's somebody's choice, that's great. But that was just, it sounded horrible to me to
right,
move alone, try to be somewhere and get them settled in for a year and then move again. So
right.
I remember at the end of that year, I had really relied on him to help me and to just kind of be strong while his dad was in Afghanistan and he went off to college. Did I ever tell you this? I like a month later, I was sitting there thinking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I expected so much of him. And so I sent him this. I'm bawling as I'm typing out this email to my son. I'm
Hmm.
so sorry. I put too much on you. Please forgive me. And I just kind of went on and on about like, this was way too hard on you. And I'm so sorry that I relied on you. This wasn't fair, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then I get no response. I thought, oh,
Oh,
this is worse than I thought. He's so mad at me. So
oh
the next time
no,
we talk to him on the phone, he's a boy. Boys just are so bad about keeping
totally.
in touch sometimes. So the
Yeah.
next time we talked to him, I said, Matthew, I sent you this email. He goes, oh, yeah, yeah. And I was like, well, and he goes, Mom, I never felt any of those things. I never felt like that. So you don't
Oh
need to
wow.
worry. I know.
Oh,
Which
you're
is
like, well,
probably the
it
best
would
thing.
have been nice if you'd responded, honey.
Exactly. But yeah, but I just think sometimes they do see that we're upset, but they don't necessarily know everything we're thinking and feeling and
That's a really good point,
we're so
Jen.
hard
That's
on
a really good point.
ourselves.
'Cause yes, yes. And I think you're right that they are way more resilient, and they're way more focused on their little world.
Sure.
So going to school and their friendships and they're not seeing the big, big picture. Not that they don't miss their dad. I
Right.
mean, they definitely missed their dad, but um, yeah, I think that they really do just kind of get into their own little life, and they're not quite as keyed in on all the things that we are. So,
Although my other son, he was very sensitive to my moods. And so this is in Germany too. I have a lot of memories from that last one because it was the last one and they were both in
yeah.
high school. And then my other two were younger, but he would, he would walk in the door and kind of sense I was having a bad day. And all of a sudden, the next thing I would know, this is Gabriel, he would have walked over to the little shopette and he would just come in and not say one word. And I'd like be in the kitchen making dinner. He'd slide like a chocolate bar across the counter to me.
That's hilarious.
And then
Mom,
I was like, he's going to be the best husband. And he is like, because he was very aware of, oh, let me tread lightly. And like, he wouldn't even say one thing. It's like, here's your dark chocolate.
That is so cute.
It was really cute. But
that is awesome.
Well, and I think what you're saying about understanding that build up to them leaving, that's so, so important. And if you're feeling like you just want it to be over with and you want them to just get on your way, that's such a normal feeling. And I think too, the other part is no matter how many times you go through it, it's a little bit surprising, isn't it? Like you think we've done this, I've got this. And then it hits you like, ugh, it still sucks. It still sucks.
People would say that to me. They go, so does it must get easier after you do it, so many times. And I said, I would love to tell you that it does. Mm-hmm. But for me, it didn't.
No.
Maybe some people it does. And there would be people I would talk to, wives who would say, it's just time for my husband to deploy. He needs another deployment. And maybe that is just how they operate, but that was never how we operated.
No, me neither.
Every deployment was a sad moment for me. I don't do life as well without my husband. Yeah. He's the fun in our lives. So I just didn't.
Well, you're married for a reason. You kind of like him. Yeah. You like him to be around.
Yeah, I like him. I like him around. I'm not looking for ways to get rid of him. So just that I couldn't relate to that, but I did realize that I learned better coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So even though nothing takes the yuck out of it, I think that we do get better at dealing with it.
Yes.
So I would say that I did get better at dealing with it, but no, it never got easier.
The other part of it is I'm totally with you with that. Like I was never like, yeah, you need to go. But we did hit a point that last decade where my husband, and I've said this multiple times, he was gone more than he was home. And I didn't like it, but it was our normal. I got very used to having to be very, very independent, which is a good trait, but it's not a great trait when they come home because you forget to be, to check in with them like you should. Because they have an opinion. They're part of this marriage. They're part of this family. And I got very used to just kind of forging ahead and making decisions. And I would like be way ahead and all of a sudden go, oh, I should see, how my husband feels about whatever the
spouses. Don't you find that spouses talk about that being one of the big transitions of coming back?
Yes.
Is who's in charge of what now? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that can be a big transition for spouses. And when spouses would ask me about that, I too would say, yeah, you do. Just like you're saying, you get used to making all the decisions. You get used to just plowing ahead and not having somebody you have to check with. And so that when they return, you really do have to kind of switch gears and remember, hey, he's part of this team too. And I do need to check in with him and I can't just plow ahead and make decisions. Some spouses would talk to me about how he would come home and just want to take charge. And I think that that's a struggle as well, because that probably should never have been to begin with. I mean, it should always be a partnership. You should always be checking with each other and talking about things. So, but trying to get back into that groove, it takes a few weeks at a minimum and maybe longer for some.
If you find yourself in that position, I feel like perhaps these deployments and separations can magnify issues that are already ongoing. Do you have any tips for that? If you have a sore spot in your marriage or something that's a weak point and it's made worse, it's usually not going to be made better unless you're very intentional about it. So do you have any resources or tips for spouses that their husband or wife has come back home and they are just not connecting? It's not going well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really good to identify that and not just kind of be okay with it. Like this is our life.
Yeah.
I think that we should always be looking at how to intentionally make our relationships better. So whether that be our husband or wife or even our friendships, friendships or relationships are a growing process. So never just accept status quo and go, well, this is just what it is.
Mhm.
If something isn't working, you got to figure out why it isn't working and how to get it moving forward. So one of the things I learned in my marriage is that I am the more verbal processor.
That's such a female thing, not to be
Yes,
stereotypical, but
it
it's
is.
true.
I know. And so I would sometimes say, I feel like I'm the emotional gatekeeper of our relationship. And I would be resentful about that um, until I came to realize that it's okay that that's what I am. I am more intentional and more keyed into the need for that. Whereas my husband is just not as much of a verbal processor. And maybe some things that bother or annoy me aren't a problem to him. And so if I need it fixed, I've got to talk to him about it. I have to be willing to bring up the hard conversation. And again, going back to what I said earlier, I'm really non-confrontational. I don't like bringing up difficult conversations, but I've learned to do it better because I know it's a necessary part of life. It just,
You mean he can't read your mind?
exactly.
Like,
And I would get
what?
mad that he wasn't reading my mind or reading my
Yeah.
passive
Yeah.
aggressive behavior. So I'm just not going to talk then. If you don't want to talk about things, we just won't talk. And so silence for a while. Well, that didn't work. It's that he won't be manipulated. So, he's happy
Oh
with
my gosh,
silence.
they're the same person. Gosh, that is so funny. No wonder they get along.
Yes. Yes. So
Yeah.
so I think it's really important that you be willing to address the issue. And so if you at least start it with a conversation and say, hey, this isn't working for me. We got to work this out. And sometimes just having the conversation is enough to fix it. Maybe he wasn't aware that that's how you were feeling. Maybe you
Right.
just needed to talk about it in order to get through it. But if at that point you realize us talking about it isn't fixing it, there is a point that you just have to decide maybe we need to bring someone else into it. And that's when it gets difficult because then you're like, oh, do we really need marriage counseling? And where do we get that? And honestly, I don't have great resources for that. I'm wondering if you do. I would say, as a military person, the first place, having had a husband who was a first sergeant, would be to go to your first sergeant.
Mhm.
Hey, we're struggling a little bit. Do you have some resources? And so they are not your marriage counselor for sure,
Right.
but they do know how to get you the resources you need and what's available to you as a military family. The chaplain
Mhm.
also.
Well, and
Yeah.
chaplains are so good. Yeah. One of my guests was talking about the 5 love languages for
Oh,
military couples. I think I'll find the right title, but that was a really
that's
eye-opening
awesome.
one for her. A person that I really look up to told me years ago, and I know this is a quote that a lot of people have heard, but I tell it to myself, just because you're feeling it doesn't make it true. So it can
Yes.
be your truth and where everybody's all about your truth, but
Yep.
just because a feeling is passing over you doesn't mean that your spouse is a terrible person or uh,
Right.
what your perception is actually the reality. And I think for sometimes putting yourself in the other person's shoes is so important because I would be
Yeah.
thinking, well, what about my needs? I've been alone. I've done this. I've done that. And if you start those
Yeah.
little mental tallies, nobody wins. It's not a
Nobody.
competition. And
Nope.
and then just thinking about, I've never had to go be in the Middle East and be away from my kids and had no one hug me. I haven't had any, that would be
Right.
awful. And what would that feel
Right.
like? And if I did go through that, how would I deal with it? And then you
Right.
suddenly have a lot more grace towards your spouse. On the flip side of that, for them to stop and think about, what is it like to be carrying all the burden for the family, to do everything for the kids without help. I think that
Yeah.
goes both ways, but you can
Right.
only control yourself. But maybe
Exactly.
having those talks where it's not a competition, but just, well, this is what we've been through. This is what I've been
Right.
through. And you start to remember you're on the same team,
Right.
which is really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, along those same lines too, like when you're having phone conversations with them while they're deployed, I think a lot of times when we're left behind, we want to spend that whole time complaining about being
Yeah.
the one that's left behind, carrying the
Don't do
whole burden, you
that.
know. And yeah, my advice always is don't do that. Don't waste
Mhm,
your time that you get to talk to them. Only, not that you can't be honest about, if
mhm.
there are some things that you need to talk through, or you need his advice or his input on how to deal with a family issue, a kid issue, a school issue, whatever. But if all you do is complain about how hard your life is without him there, all it will do is tear down your relationship.
And it
There's
stresses me
no
out.
good in that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
And it's that fine balance of being honest versus
Yes.
what is needed to be shared in this moment. Like, what good will
Yes.
this do if I have 5 minutes to talk to him,
Yes.
or her? The other thing I was gonna mention too was this last one when he came back, we were so smug. We were leading up to him returning, and we didn't really get to talk on the phone a lot. We never got to Skype just because of where he was. Like, we never had any kind of video chat. That was not an option
Aw.
where he was. And so we would write a lot of emails. And then whenever
Mhm.
he could get to it, he would look at it and answer it. And so we're kind of going back and forth a couple months before he came back, like, we got this. We know how to do this.
Mhm.
Feeling very prepared. Like, this is not our first rodeo. We know what reintegration is
Mhm.
like. And come to find out, whoo, we had some struggles, and it was very humbling. Like, at this
Mhm.
point, I think he'd been in over 25 years and going, really? And that just goes to show you, you can be as prepared as possible. And it's still going to be a huge adjustment, especially if they've
Yeah.
been gone for a long time. So I think for us, our faith has really helped with a lot of that because it's helped make
Mhm.
sense of things and we have this common faith. But I wanted you to talk about how important has faith been to your marriage, Terri?
Well, yeah, I'm with you. It is the foundation of our marriage. So, without our faith, I often wonder, not to make anybody feel bad who isn't on this page with me, but I just don't know how I would get through life without my faith.
Mhm.
Um, it's it, I pray about everything, so nothing is too big or too small. I prayed about getting my contact in this morning, and I got it in. I'm a new contact wearer.
Oh,
I hate putting them in. Anyway,
moments with God. You can find them
yes,
anywhere.
I'm serious. I just so yeah, we just and we've gotten better about praying together, which is often I find even of really seasoned marriages to find out yeah, we don't really pray together. Yeah, it's just it's a unique kind of thing, and we do try to pray together, and I think that breaks down some barriers and helps us go to God about all the things that are a struggle in our lives. But I really do believe that God has helped us work through um, some stuff that I don't think we would have gotten through without praying about it, without trusting Him to work on things. Sometimes it's as simple as I remember in Germany when I was going through that really dark first time of being away from family and being in a new place, and we were having some struggles just with each other. And um, I remember praying about some stupid issue about him taking the garbage out. It was just something stupid. It was stupid, but it was a monumental moment of me with God saying, I don't know if I can put up with this,
Oh,
like, and feeling like, what are you going to do? Fly home? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
but it felt really big to me at the time. And I just remember feeling like God was showing me that the change needed to happen in my heart, not in him. That if he never did whatever it was I wanted him to do about the garbage, was I going to be able to love him well anyway?
Oh,
Was
wow.
I really going to let garbage be the issue? And um, it was a critical moment of me learning that I was the one who needed to make an adjustment.
Mm,
And that was really good for me going forward in marriage in general, because my faith and my belief in how God is shaping us and molding us all the time, I was willing to surrender and let Him say, "It's really you that needs to change in this moment." But seriously, I was still fighting back, going, "No, no, no, no." I was asking a simple thing. Seriously, you're telling me that he can't take the garbage out? And
You
it's
need to
like,
change him. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I wanted. I wanted God to change him and make him perfect so that I could love him well. And God was
'Cause
showing
that
me,
would be
no,
ever so easy.
wouldn't it? Yeah. So,
Well, it's good you
and
learned that early on.
well, and I'm still learning it.
Well, sure. 'Cause that's the whole I think I'm gonna have to do, like, a whole series on life after retirement later on, 'cause
Oh,
that's a whole
seriously.
other
Seriously. Yeah.
transition.
Yes, that was a whole nother transition. Oh my goodness. Yeah. But
Well, and just when you think you've got things figured out, that's the thing about military life. It changes and you have to
yeah.
readjust and you have to find a new normal, which sounds cliche, but it's so true because you'll just get it all figured out. You're overseas or you're stateside or they're deployed or they're not deployed
Yeah.
and you get into whatever that groove is and then boop, it changes and
Yep.
it keeps you on your toes. That is
Yeah,
for
it does.
sure. Well, do
Yeah.
you have any I'm just as we wrap it up here, for a spouse that's maybe facing their first deployment, do you have a couple of tips of how to best prepare or things that have worked for you?
Well, I would say definitely prepare your heart. Just know going in, manage your expectations. Know that it is going to be hard, and really, there's nothing you can do that's going to make it not be hard. But you can learn to do some things like when you're feeling really frustrated with your husband, take a step back and realize I'm not really frustrated with him. I'm frustrated with the situation. And be more kind. Choose your words carefully. Don't let things blow up into ridiculous arguments that you're going to regret later. Just take a step back. Sometimes no words are better than the wrong words.
Yeah.
I often say you can't take back words, but you can choose to um, re-say them later. So if you feel the impulse to say something that you're feeling a check in your heart about, don't say it. Just wait, because it might just be the emotion of the moment. But if it's something that really needs to be said, you can readdress it later. But wow, once those hurtful words are out, they resonate in the mind of the person you said it
Mhm.
to. And sometimes that damage is really hard to fix. So just be careful about your words. Just know it's a hard time. Manage your expectations, and then talk to each other. Don't freeze each other out in your preparation for the pain either.
Yeah.
Just try to walk through it together, and you'll get through it. You will get through it, and you need to keep telling yourself that too. We're going to get through this. It's going to be okay.
And I think that would apply to reintegration as well as the coming
Yes.
home it's the same things. You don't have to give voice to every thought you're having. And that's hard to do, especially I'm a very verbal person and I have a lot of words that I've said that I regret. And I wish that I would have just shut my
Yeah.
mouth. And we used to always read my kids and I, the Little House on the Prairie books
Mhm.
together. And so Ma Ingalls is a wealth of
Oh, yes.
wisdom. And I remember it's several times in those books where she said, least said, soonest mended. And I'm like, no, you need to talk it out and say your truth, blah, blah. And the older I get, I'm like, there's so much wisdom in that. You don't have to, vomit out everything you're thinking. It's not necessary. I love that advice, Terry. I think that's really important. So for reintegration, same kind of advice. And is there anything else for when they're coming home? I mean, I think managing expectations is a huge
Yeah.
one because they're exhausted,
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah. I think the more that you can extend grace and love and be give space for your spouse to reintegrate and be focused on his needs and not your own. I know that's hard advice because we do go, well, what about me? When is he going to do that for me? But if you can just block that thought out altogether and just go, I'm just going to do what I have the power to do. Because like you said earlier, we can only control ourselves. So the more I focused on making sure that my husband felt like he was welcomed back into the family, that I was consulting him on what decisions I was making and giving him space to reintegrate, the better the whole situation went. And the more that I was reaping the benefit of that because he was given a safe space to love me back. He didn't come into this
Yeah.
harsh, you've been gone for all this time and now you need to pick up. And Yeah, it's my turn. When is my chance to get away? Not that you shouldn't be able to get away for a couple days if he's willing to allow that, but don't rush at him with that. Just take it easy. I don't know if that's good advice or not, but
Oh,
that's
it's
what I
very
would
good
say.
advice, and I think you and I have both been around long enough to see it the other way and how hard that
Mhm,
is, and I love that thought of a welcoming space to just they've gotta decompress and even have time to heal and
mhm.
just they're physically exhausted, they're emotionally exhausted, and I think it again goes back to put yourself in each other's shoes,
Yeah,
and if you need a break, there's a way to go about
there
that. You can
is.
be honest and just
Yes.
say, what maybe the kids need to go to the grandparents or we need to have a weekend away. I think too, the other thought of thinking it's going to be this big honeymoon, it
Yes.
might be, but it
Right.
also probably is not going to meet those movie type of
Yeah,
expectations. That's
that
not
is
real life,
good.
especially
Right.
if you're on multiple deployments. And I think that whole thing of they're gone, they come back, and then the whole time they're back, if you know they're going again like you did, you kind of
Yeah,
live with that dread.
yeah.
That's until you're out of it, you go, that is not a normal way for a family to live.
No, it's
And
not.
it's and we know that. We're not saying it's easy. But so what you have to do is if that is your normal, you've got to figure out a way to live with it and cope with it.
The
And
other thing
so,
that was helpful to me too, and it may help somebody else, is what is that song? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It
yeah.
you really do grow in these moments. You become a better, stronger person if you choose to go that route. If you decide this is not going to kill me, I am going to get better. I am going to get stronger. You will. It will make you better.
It will. And again, I just have to put this little disclaimer. We're not talking about extreme cases.
Right.
And if there are issues that you're having, there are resources for that. And I will
Yes.
put links to all of that. But this is just more towards the normal
Yes.
day to day. And I have gotten some notes from spouses, dealing with huge fallouts from PTSD. And that's another
That's a whole different
issue
issue.
entirely.
Yeah.
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 So my heart goes out to you if you're dealing with that and do
Yeah.
know that there are resources for you.
Yeah.
But I think this is more towards the day to day rhythm of a typical
Yes.
separation and yeah. And
That's a good
it
point
can
to
be
make,
hard.
though. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not saying put up with anything. That is
No,
not
and
what we're
that's yeah, I kind of feel like I hope they're hearing my heart on this. I'm not even saying your feelings don't matter, and they do, but the more we fight for our rights and the more we fight for being heard, the more it just goes badly. It just
Yeah.
never has gone well in my experience. So,
I am with you. Well, we've been married
yeah.
31 years. You guys have been married for 30 years.
Yeah.
Jeez. I don't feel old until I put things into
I
those
know.
terms. But I do think it's important for younger spouses to hear from somebody that's had a successful marriage, that you've made it work. It hasn't been
Yeah.
easy. And this is what has helped you. And I have a friend of mine that's 10 years in front of me. And she's the one that said the whole thing about just because you feel it doesn't make it true, because I was kind of coming up to that premenopausal, those moments. And I was like, why is my husband so stupid? And she's like, he's suddenly just so mean. And she's like, is he though? I was like, stop bringing logic into it. And, she just, so it's the same kind of thing of just because you're feeling it a certain way does not mean that that's the truth of the matter. And just to step back sometimes and,
Right.
oh, it's hard.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
well, Terri, I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I don't know if you have anything else to add before we close out.
I don't think so. We've covered a lot of
You
ground
you
today.
have such good thoughts, and I think you're an invaluable resource. And if people want to connect with you, I don't know if you have a public social media or if you're on Twitter or
That is
anything.
so funny. Yeah, I'm not really good at that. I do have a blog that I post once every 6 months. So
Well, we will share that then if you
yeah,
want.
it's really sad, but yeah, I can send you the blog spot. I'm on Facebook. I do have a Twitter account somewhere, but I never look at
Oh,
it.
you're so
I'm
funny.
really I'm not very good at the social media thing. So
Well, we will share your
but
blog if people want to connect with you that way. But I
awesome.
thank you so much for taking your time to come on and share, Terri.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's such an honor that you would have me, Jen.
Oh,
So
of course.
this has been a blast.
Thanks for listening to the MilSpouse Matters podcast. You can connect with me at jen-mcdonald.com or on social media as @MilSpouseMatters. You can find even more military life support with my books, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, and MilSpouse Matters, Sharing Strength Through Our Stories, as well as my other podcast, The Christian MilSpouse. Love the show? Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening, and then share it with someone else who could use it too. Until next time, have a great week.